For Session Update, I'm Shannon Lurkey. Surrounded by the family members of loved ones who've died as a result of drivers distracted by cell phones, bipartisan lawmakers and advocates rallied in the Capitol Rotunda in support of hands-free cell phone technology for drivers. Currently, 15 states and the District of Columbia require drivers to use hands-free mode. Here's that rally at the Capitol.
Thank you so much for coming to this rally for hands-free cell phone requirement bill, 1180 in Senate File 837. First of all, we can't thank you all enough for your support and for your dedication to safe driving and safe traffic. I just wanted to take a moment before we get started to just talk a little bit about a day in Minnesota. My name is Paul Austin. I'm with the Minnesota Safety Council. I'll be acting as the MC for the program. But did you know that today in Minnesota, on an average Minnesota day, there'll be 200 car crashes. And 40 or 50 of those car crashes will be related to distracted driving. There will be 100 injuries on the road today in Minnesota. 20 to 25 of those injuries are related to distracted driving. And there will be a fatality today in Minnesota on the roads. And every 4 days, one of those fatalities is related to distracted driving. You can see people here behind me who have lost immediate family members and loved ones to distracted driving. This is not something that is a little deal. It's not casual. It's not intermittent. It's very real. It's every day, and it's on our roads. And that's why we're here today, to try to galvanize some action around passing some public policy that will help reduce distracted driving. Will a hands-free cell phone bill solve distracted driving? Absolutely not. Will it solve all the fatalities? Absolutely not. But if you look at the trajectory of traffic safety across the decades, it's always been in steps. And this is one step forward that we think we can all make now. We've got a range of speakers today representing victims, victims' families, the extended families and community that are affected by an event. We have folks representing law enforcement and public safety. We have folks representing bicycling and trucking associations and the insurance industry. And then we're going to hear from the authors and legislators who are supporting these bills. So to start off, I'd like to ask Greg Tucholsky to join us up on stage. Greg is going to make a statement on behalf of all of the victims' families that you see here today. So welcome, Greg.
On October 28, 2015, my dad, Joe Tucholsky, received a life sentence while getting his morning newspaper. The irony of the tragedy is that Dad worked for nearly 50 years as a school bus driver, whose job was to deliver kids to and from school safely every day. My name is Greg Tucholsky. I feel a heavy burden speaking on behalf of those who have lost a loved one to distracted drivers. Whenever we feel tired and overwhelmed, we think of the many families who have fought for so much longer than we have for this bill. Because until it happened to us, we thought distracted driving was a problem. Now we realize it's a deadly epidemic. Look around today. We are joined by images of our loved ones killed at the hands of a distracted driver. This, unfortunately, is but a small group of victims of our state's negligent laws regarding cell phone use while driving. Trust us, this is a club you never want to be a part of. My dad's death came at the hands of a driver who was replying to her daughter's text message. A witness said there were no brake lights and there were no skid marks. Unfortunately, an all too common theme on our roads. The driver stated before she was able to hit send, she hit a yellow blur. That yellow blur was my dad. I'm wearing a jacket similar to the jacket my dad wore to prove how visible he was as he was walking down the county road just out in front of his house. It really didn't matter what he wore if the driver wasn't paying attention. I don't want the last memory of my dad to be lying in a ditch under a blanket next to the field that he farmed his entire life. Along with my family, we decided to join the fight to make our roads safer. The life we save may be our own. Federal safety officials call distracted driving a serious epidemic. If we had a medical health concern deemed an epidemic, resources would be appropriated, or at the very least, we would prevent the epidemic from spreading. I'm not seeing that regarding texting and driving. I see an unchecked epidemic. We're playing Russian roulette with the killing machine every time we get behind the wheel of our car. Last year, a bill was introduced in the state legislature that would have helped. I would like to thank those who sponsored the bill: Representative Hornstein, Newberger, Uglum, and Senator Carlson. The bill would have banned the use of handheld phones while driving. Minnesota could have joined 14 other states who have already banned handheld use. Representatives from the State Patrol, insurance companies, personal injury attorneys, as well as numerous family members of victims of distracted driving testified in 2 committees in favor of the bill. Unfortunately, the Minnesota State Legislature failed to take action. As we watched, Oregon and Washington passed handheld bans in 2017. What did Minnesota do? We buried another 70 victims. I would have a hard time sleeping at night knowing my vote could have saved lives. We appreciate the work in front of our lawmakers this year. It's a short session, and there are a number of issues you have to tackle, including opioid addiction, which has taken many Minnesotan lives. Addiction to cell phones as we drive is a deadly problem that needs to be addressed as well. Imagine being on a road with a driver who is impaired by both. Years ago, the biggest concern of mine was to be on the roads on Friday or Saturday night between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m. There was a small window when our roads were filled with drunk drivers. Today, we have to be concerned at all hours of the day because of distracted drivers. Every day is a crapshoot. Look at the faces of the drivers who pass you on the highway. If you're not scared, you're not paying attention. Let's learn from drunk driving legislation. Stricter laws for drunk driving have helped. Although the numbers are still too high, we've seen the number of drunk driving fatalities cut in half, thanks to more strict laws, public ad campaign, and a cultural change. In 1980, there were 26,000 fatalities caused by drinking and driving. In 2009, there were 13,000. Minnesota has been slow to enact alcohol legislation. We were among the last states to go to .08. We were among the last states to raise the minimum legal drinking age to 21. As your voters, we don't want that reputation. We're asking lawmakers to increase the learning curve on handheld ban while driving. Our lawmakers need to listen. In May of 2017, the Minneapolis Star-Tribune printed an article that read, "Most Minnesotans want laws against using cell phones while driving to be as tough as those against drinking and driving." The Star-Tribune poll indicated 78% of Minnesotans surveyed said texting or checking Facebook while driving should be treated equal to or more severely than drunken driving. That's 78%. Even as politically divided as we've become, there seems to be one thing Minnesotans can agree on, and no political belief keeps you safe on our roads. Distracted drivers have many faces. Mine, yours, our kids. And distracted drivers kill Republicans and Democrats alike. It is indiscriminate. Cultural change is difficult. Studies show behaviors change when punishment is more severe. If we want to make people slow down, speed bumps do a lot more than a drive slowly sign. Strict penalties will work to change behavior. Judges and prosecuting attorneys claim their hands are tied by Minnesota law. Thus, we have the lenient penalties we do. Without stronger laws, the preventable slaughter will continue on Minnesota roads. We beg you, save lives. You hold the key to making a change. While it's too late to save my dad and those whose portraits are around us, it's not too late to save ourselves. Minnesota needs to become the 17th state to pass hands-free legislation. Winston Churchill said, there are three kinds of people in this world. People who make it happen, people who watch what happens, and people who wonder what happened. I ask our lawmakers, which group do you want to belong to? Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Our next speaker is Dorian Grilly. He's the head of the Bicycle Alliance of Minnesota, and he has some personal and organizational perspectives on distracted driving from a roadside view. Dorian?
Thank you. Happy to be here today. The Bicycle Alliance staff includes teachers who train other educators who teach biking and walking safety to elementary school kids and adults. Our other staff focus on working with communities and businesses that want to make it easy, safe, and fun for their residents and employees to bike more. More than 50% of Minnesotans bike, and the vast majority say they would like to bike more and bike to more places, but they are afraid to use the streets. And I know why firsthand, as Paul mentioned. In 2010, I was riding home from a meeting about safe routes to school with the Minnesota Department of Health and the Minnesota Department of Transportation staff when I was hit by a driver who pled guilty to careless driving and was fined $500. I spent 3 weeks at Regions Hospital, and it cost several $100,000 to screw me back together. But I'm one of the lucky ones. I lived to see my kids grow up. And I'm so sorry for all of you. And one of the most recent bicyclists was indeed Phil, a husband and father of two teens who was hit and killed while riding on the shoulder of a county road near Belle Plaine. The 16-year-old that hit him at highway speed had received a Snapchat message seconds before swerving onto the shoulder. The driver was charged with criminal vehicular homicide, a felony, and a reckless driving gross misdemeanor. Another one of the just unthinkable tragedies was a couple years ago when Andrea Bovey was towing her two kids in a bike trailer on a straight stretch of county road in far southwest of Minnesota, a very quiet section of road, when she was hit and killed by a driver that was conducting an online banking transaction. By some miracle, the kids survived, but will grow up without their mother. The driver pled guilty to criminal vehicular homicide and served a short jail sentence and is doing community service. I share these stories because I want people to know that distracted driving is not just an urban and suburban problem. It's a big problem everywhere. Deaths of pedestrians and bicyclists, our most vulnerable road users, are on the rise all over the country. Drivers just don't think it's going to happen to them, and that in one split second, they can take someone's life, wreck their own life, and devastate a family. We need to send a strong message that this is simply not acceptable. Thank you.
So clearly the impact of distracted driving is very personal, and it affects the immediate families of those who are involved, but it also stretches out beyond that. I'd like to ask Melissa Dickenhausen to join us up here on stage, and she's going to talk about the story of Ideal Credit Union and how when they lose one of their own employees, the impact is much longer and stretches even further than just the family. Melissa?
Two years ago, Ideal Credit Union launched a Don't Text and Drive awareness campaign. Stop the text, stop the wrecks. This campaign was created in remembrance of David Riggs, who was a friend and co-worker at Ideal. David lost his life to a distracted driver. We have made a pledge in honor of David to give him a voice by encouraging drivers to put their phones away while behind the wheel. This is a simple way to save lives and prevent accidents. We are encouraging drivers to not text while operating their vehicles. In this day and age, when communication technology is at its peak, we need to make an extra effort to understand the consequences that texting and using your phone behind the wheel can be fatal. Ideal Credit Union's goal is to create a greater awareness throughout the coming years. We want to challenge and encourage drivers to change their behaviors while behind the wheel and cultivate a higher awareness on distracted driving. That is why we are here today. We can all take the pledge in support of this very important legislation. Let's give David Riggs and all the others lost by distracted driving a voice. No text is worth a life. We invite everyone to take the pledge on our website at idealcu.com, search pledge. And let's put an end to this epidemic. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. Our next speaker is going to give us a perspective that's maybe a little bit different. And we're going to bring up Mike Hansen. He's the new head of the Office of Traffic Safety in the Department of Public Safety. He also happens to be a very recently retired state trooper. And when you start talking to folks who work in public safety and on the roads, they can tell you some of the stories of the distraction that are different than some of us see every day. Mike?
Thank you, Paul, and thank all of you for being here today to address what is a very important and serious topic for those of us in Minnesota. I've heard the term epidemic used a couple of times today, and just to give you an example of the challenge that we face when it comes to changing our behavior in Minnesota, especially behind the wheel. Yesterday afternoon as I drove home, I live in a western suburb, I took a close look at what was going on in the cars around me on I-94 and I-394. And as I looked around me, I didn't have to look for more than a couple minutes to find somebody else who was on their phone, either doing something to manipulate it with their fingers or whether they were talking on it. And it just, again, drove home the point that we have a serious addiction problem with the electronic devices in our vehicles that leads to these distractions. As I got near my home, I came to a stoplight, and the light turned green. All the traffic moved except for the car directly in front of me. And as I looked through the rear window of that SUV, I could clearly see the driver was using their phone, not talking on it, but was manipulating it with their hands. And I timed it, and it was 6 seconds before that vehicle actually moved. So we have distraction issues across the state. It is something that we need to address, and it is important that we all pay attention to it, and that we work together to change driver behavior. The Department of Public Safety, the Department of Transportation, and the Department of Health currently work cooperatively with the Towards Zero Deaths initiative across the state. In TZD, we talk about the 4 E's that are critical to changing driver behavior and to solving the traffic safety issues that we all face: enforcement, engineering, education, and emergency medical services. We've recently added the 5th E to that, which is absolutely going to be key to our success, and that is getting everybody to buy into the message that we have to change behaviors in order to save lives. It goes without saying that the strongest reason to change our driver behavior in Minnesota is standing right behind me here. We don't need, these are all preventable incidents. They don't have to happen. If we all make better decisions behind the wheel, we can and we will make a difference and save lives in Minnesota. Thank you.
Before I bring up the next speaker, I would just like to point out that if you've gotten the feeling that there's a fairly wide range of folks interested in working on this issue, it's absolutely true. Mike talked about TZD, which is a long-standing intergovernmental effort to improve traffic safety. You've got a group of families behind me that has come together over time, unfortunately, to work on this effort together. And we've got folks like our Just Drive Coalition out of Wright County with the orange T-shirts that are also here. This is not something that is coming out of one place and in one time. It's something that is built over time and crosses many, many boundaries on the way through. One of the groups that's been very active in this conversation is the professional truckers. These are the folks who drive for a living. And John Housladen, the head of the Minnesota Trucking Association, is here to give us their perspective on the issue. John?
Good morning, everyone. It's safe to say that for trucking companies, safety is not a priority, but it's a core value. It's something that does not change based on business challenges or what's going on outside in the weather, but it's something that we're focused on every day. And so as a safety organization, the Minnesota Trucking Association supports legislation to restrict cellular phone use to hands-free only mode while driving. We think it only makes sense. You've heard data already, and the facts are indisputable. Distracted driving does cause crashes. And according to the National Safety Council, talking on a cellular phone puts a driver and all the drivers on the road, including those professional truck drivers, at a 4-time greater risk at a crash than their undistracted peers. And our professional truck drivers have a very unique view to see what takes place in the vehicles around them. As you know, they're up high, they look down, they see everything. And the news is not good. Far too many drivers are preoccupied with operating their phones, shifting their focus from the road to the device. We believe that restrictions in this legislation will enhance safety by redirecting that focus back onto the driving task itself. And it's important to note that what is envisioned by the bill is actually current practice by professional truck drivers. Federal regulations already prohibit professional truck drivers from talking on cell phones unless operating in a one-touch, hands-free mode. Our industry has found this a very positive thing. And in fact, many trucking companies on their own, without laws, without regulations, have made it a company-wide policy to prohibit to prohibit using cell phones at all in the cab. They don't want to have those drivers distracted when they're out there doing their main task. We supported the texting ban when it was before the legislature, and we look forward to passing this legislation and reducing distracted driving for all Minnesota motorists.
So our next speaker is Mark Kolda. He's from the Insurance Federation of Minnesota. And there's a couple of reasons that the Insurance Federation has been a great partner in this effort. One is there's clearly a human cost to distracted driving. But even if you're in the audience or you're listening to this later and you're thinking to yourself, well, I don't drive very much, I'm a safe driver, you know, I try to avoid driving at peak times, you're still paying in your insurance bill for distracted driving and the crashes that are caused by it. So there is a financial cost to the state as well on top of the human cost, which essentially doubles up the loss anytime there's a distracted incident. So with that, Mark Kolda from the Insurance Federation of Minnesota.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. From the insurance industry's perspective, I just wanted to kind of bring home the real reason why we are involved in this issue. There is a definite financial cost to consumers in Minnesota for distracted driving. Several CEOs of insurance companies have noticed that insurance claims are on the increase. And something that folks need to know, when insurance companies have to pay more in claims costs, we have to charge it in premiums, right? So what I like to say is that when the claims costs go up and we have to pay more, it's not our money, the insurance company's money, that's paying for that. It's your money. So that when we pay more in claims costs, you have to pay more in insurance premiums. And let's be honest, cars are safer these days, right? So on the roadways, it should be better, because cars are safer, and for a while people were driving less. And in Minnesota, for about 10 years, we saw decreased claims costs. And from the peak of our insurance premiums till about 5 years ago, we saw about a 30% decrease in claims, which led to a 30% decrease in insurance premiums. But an alarming thing happened about 5 or 6 years ago, which corresponded to the rise in the use of smartphones. We started seeing claims costs not only stop decreasing, they actually leveled off, and now claims costs are on the increase. And so in the last few years, we've seen claims go up about 15%. And we think that it's mostly attributable to distracted driving. And the bottom line message is there is a real cost to distracted driving, and every one of you are paying that cost in increased insurance premiums, and we need to stop it right now by passing this bill. I would like to thank also the legislative authors of this bill, Representative Mark Uglum, who I don't see here yet. There he is, my good buddy Mark Uglum from Champlin. He's really the chief author of this bill, who did a great job in really getting the attention going on this bill. And also Representative Frank Hornstein, who knows a little bit about transportation issues because he was the chair of the House Transportation Committee. And also Senator Jim Carlson from Burnsville, who has taken on this issue and is doing whatever he needs to do to pass this bill, even at great personal sacrifice, and he knows what I'm talking about. We had a seminar about 2 weeks ago at Cargill in Wayzata where we talked about these issues, and some of the best comments were from the legislators. So let's, if we could, thank the legislators for their support. Thank you very much. Because despite all the public support for this bill, if you look at the House bill, there are 20 authors on each side of the aisle. There are 40 co-authors of this bill, both Democrats and Republicans. We know the governor will sign this bill, right? We have great legislative support. We have great public support. Look at the Minnesota Star Tribune poll that showed almost 75% of Minnesotans favor enhanced penalties. They want to punish distracted drivers more severely than drunk drivers. We know there is strong support for this bill, but despite that support, there are people in this very building who do not want this bill to pass, and we need to change their minds, and we'll let those guys talk about it. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
We couldn't have asked for a better segue. Representative Uglum, Representative Hornstein, the members of the House, come on up. Let's hear from the authors, the people who are going to change this.
Well, good morning. Good morning. It's great to see so many people here supporting this very important issue. And as you can see behind me, we have a number of members of the House of Representatives. There are 40 co-authors on this. This is a bipartisan effort. Democrats and Republicans banding together to take care of a tremendous problem that we have here in Minnesota and across the United States. I don't need to tell you, because many of you are victims here or friends of victims, about how dangerous distracted driving is. But here at the legislature, we need to move forward with a bill. It's House File 1180. I'd urge each and every one of you to go see your local representative or senator and tell them that we need this thing passed, and we need it now. We can't afford to wait any longer as people are being killed on our roads. It's one of the most horrific things that I can think of right now. We all know how DUI is a tremendous problem. Well, guess what? Distracted driving is just as bad. Just as bad. Now, right now, the House of Representatives, the legislature, just went into session. This is going to be a very short session. The committee chairs of public safety, transportation, and possibly a couple others are going to play a very key role in us getting a hearing on this bill and moving it out of committee onto the floor. And I'm very confident that once it hits the floor, it's going to pass big time. So I have a number of other representatives up here that would like to speak a little bit about this, but all I can say is we need to get this bill done now and stop the carnage on our roads. Thank you.
How about a nice big round of applause for Representative Uglem? He's done such a great job. I'm State Representative Frank Hornstein. I represent a district in southwest Minneapolis and a small part of downtown. And we've been at this a long time. But I'm very, very hopeful that this year will be the year. Now, we have heard it's a short session. But you know, it's never too short a session to save lives. It's never too short a session to do the right thing. It's never too short a session for everybody here and all of your friends and neighbors and contacts to make sure that you are in touch with your state legislatures to let them know that this is the year we can get this done. Bipartisanship is in precious short supply around here. And you heard from Representative Uglem how important this is to rank and file members of both parties. He is absolutely right. If this bill gets to the floor of the House and the Senate, it will pass. So make sure on your to-do list that in addition to your own legislator, who is accountable to you and your neighbors and your voters and the voters in your area, you make sure that House and Senate leadership and those key committee chairs are on your to-do list. They need to hear from you as well. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for turning out today. This is a critical public safety issue for our state, and I want to also thank all of you who have suffered so much, who have lost so much, keeping the memory of your loved ones alive through your activism. We can get this done this year. It's never too short a session to do the right thing and to save lives. Thank you so much for being here.
My name is Representative Bob Lunan, and I represent the area of River South, which is the Shakopee area. One of the first words you learn when you were taught to read is the word look. Look isn't even phonetically correct, but that's how important that word is to look. And this is where the texting and driving comes in conflict. I come from an education background. I have a son who's an educator. I have grandparents that were educators. I actually would invite school districts at the junior high and high school level in the Phi-Ed classes to have everyone bring their cell phone. Everyone's got everyone else's cell phone number, and let's play dodgeball. And you have to answer every text you get. And you see what distraction is like in a benign area to make the point of how important it is to pay attention to what you're doing and the effect it has on the decisions you make. The bill we're proposing, the hands-free bill, is not perfect, but we cannot let perfection get in the way of improvement. We've got to continue to get better and better and better. Texting falls into two categories. We've got what I refer to as a texaholic, the people that are bound and determined to live their lives on their phone 24 hours a day or any time they're awake. We also have the random texters. I think legislatively we need to deal with the texaholics with a heavy hand. I'm going to be proposing a bill that does what was brought up earlier, match up the distracted driving penalties with those that involve alcohol. The consequences are the same. The penalty should be the same. But I also want to talk briefly about the random texters. And there's something we can do even on the way home today. When you're on the road and you see someone on their phone, honk and hard. Honk to get their attention. And then just tap your heart. When I'm worried about your safety, I'm worried about the safety of my loved ones that are on the road now also. Let's start a movement to these people, reminding them that that's not right. Most of the people that are texting, it's an afterthought, and they have not thought it through. Let's come up with a buzz point right away. I'm calling it the rage of angels. Everyone out on the road gets frustrated with people we see texting and get concerned. Let's get a signal to them, not a combative one, just one pointing out going, I have loved ones on the road right now. Would you please be more careful than you are? Thank you everyone for coming, and my condolences to the people standing behind me.
I'm sorry, Ray, did you want to talk? Good morning. Thank you all for coming out here. I'm State Representative Jim Newberger. I live in Becker, Minnesota. I represent House District 15B. I'm here to tell you today that this is truly a bipartisan effort. And what Representative Hornstein said is true. Bipartisanship is a rare thing at this point in this time in history for our state. But this is probably, in my opinion, and in my collective history, the most bipartisan bill I've seen in a very long time. This is not a Republican issue. This is not a Democrat issue. This is a Minnesota issue. And we need to address this. Some of you might be thinking, well, we're just a bunch of guys in suits. What do we know? We've been there. Myself personally, I've been a paramedic full-time for 30 years. I've seen firsthand the results of distracted driving. In my own district, we had a family was killed, the Maurer family. I was at that scene when their minivan got split open like an egg and 2 of the members were killed and others were injured. I was there. So we feel your pain. The people that you have elected to represent you, we also relate to you. We feel it, and we're working for you. We want to be very clear, especially as we move forward on this message, that we are not saying no to talking on the phone in the car. What the bill says is that you can talk on the phone hands-free. Hands-free. So if someone comes up to you and says, you're taking away my ability to talk on the phone, that's not true. You can talk hands-free because the technology allows us to do that. What we don't want people doing while they're driving is this. That's what we're trying to accomplish, because that's what's going to save lives. Again, thank you for being here. You being here will make this bill a law. God bless you.